Peerless Innovation Center for sponsoring our lunches. Appreciate you. All right. I know I'm still recovering from Dr. Herman's talk before lunch. It was just so wonderful. We're glad that he was able to be here with us today. As we move into the afternoon portion, we've got a couple more panels coming up. And to introduce you to the next panel, I am so pleased to bring up to the stage Miss Andrea Kunk, President of Peerless Innovation Center.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. It is my pleasure to introduce the next panel and to just take a brief minute and just give a quick overview of Peerless Technologies and Peerless Innovation Center. So Peerless was founded here in Dayton in 2000 as a brand new startup. We were actually the first tenant of the original Entrepreneur Center, which is on Monument Avenue, and now the Entrepreneur Center is run out of the second floor of this building. So as you look up and you see all of the activity up here, these are startup companies that are a part of the entrepreneurial ecosystem of our community, and Peerless was very blessed to be, again, the first tenant and the first graduate of the original Dayton Entrepreneur Center. So Peerless, we grew up as a services company, and we developed a lot of strong capabilities across our company on various projects, serving the Air Force, the Navy, and our NASA customers. And earlier this year, we launched our Peerless Innovation Center, which is a part of Peerless, but it really is our effort to better leverage and synergize the existing capabilities that we have to support changing customer requirements, partner requirements, and most importantly, warfighter requirements. So our Peerless Innovation Center is an investment in personnel, digital tools, infrastructure, and training. So we've brought in leadership and a chief architect with really strong backgrounds in digital systems engineering, open architecture, multispectral engineering, and we're making sure that we have the right tools in place, the right infrastructure in place, building out a digital engineering environment so that we are prepared to continue to serve the changing requirements of our customers. So our Peerless Innovation Center is all about changing the way we do business and implementing digital strategies. And with that, I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to introduce the next panel, Mr. Odie Dimmerly and team, who are going to come up and talk about, give us some insights on how the Air Force and our industry partners are really leading the way in implementing these digital strategies. So with that, come on up. Thank you all so much.
So good afternoon, everyone. Noah Odie Demmerly here. I go by Odie from the Digital Transformation Office. I work for Kyle. And so excited to talk to you this afternoon about digital strategies. Now, before we begin, you might be wondering, why have the panelists not sit down yet? Why have they not sat down yet? That's because I'd like you to indulge me for a minute. So, if you could put your plates, your cell phones, your computers, and everything else down for a minute, and everyone with me stand. We're going to do an activity. So for a second, I'd like you to close your eyes. Everyone just close your eyes. And imagine for a minute the favorite thing that you like to do. It could be a hobby, it could be a sport, it could be something that you just enjoy doing. It could be walking down the beach, could be playing golf, maybe doing some yoga, whatever it may be. Imagine that for just a second. And now imagine how you plan for that activity. What do you do to plan? There's got to be some sort of preparation that you do in advance, whether it's preparing for vacation or stretching. What might you do to save up for this activity monetarily? How would you evaluate progress in this activity? Maybe you're handicap gets a little lower, maybe you can run a mile a little faster. And what would you do to train? Would you take lessons? Would you get instruction or coaching from someone? All right, thank you for indulging me in that activity. Why don't we all take our seats and open our eyes back up, please, before you sit down. Now, strategies, as we know, are essential to digital material management and digital transformation. Much like we just did in this previous activity, before you go on your digital journey, you have to have something of a plan. Without a plan, we are planning to fail, as one would say. Now, General Richardson yesterday talked about PEOs and TEOs, and he talked about how PEOs must approve digital strategies and must approve strategies that absolutely have to include digital, and TEOs must embrace these digital strategies. As you read in the white paper, which is available on dafdto.com, strategies must be cross-functional and across the life cycle. They also must be evaluated across legacy and digitally born platforms. One of the ways we're trying to do this in the DTO is through things like our digital maturity model, which is also publicly available on our digital guide on dafdto.com. We use this digital maturity model to help programs and offices come up with these digital strategies and assess themselves in where they are digitally today and where they want to be digitally tomorrow. And strategy also, as we must remember, is people-centric, not asset-centric. People roll out these strategies and follow them, and culture change is a vital part of our strategies. So before we go any further, I'd like to introduce myself and the panel. As I said, Odie Demerly here. I was previously an aircraft maintenance officer in the Air Force, went to industry to work for what is now GE Aerospace for a number of years in flight test, component test, and remote diagnostics and monitoring, and then came full circle back to the Air Force as a contractor and now a civilian in the F-15 program office and now the digital transformation office. Mr. Mark Tang. Mark Tang is the Director of Digital Transformation Strategy for Northrop Grumman. He is responsible for leading an enterprise strategy across the full spectrum of digital operations, ranging from engineering and manufacturing to acquisition, program execution, and portfolio management. In his prior role, Mr. Tang was responsible for strategy and business development of Northrop Grumman's strategic deterrent systems portfolio. Since he joined the company in 2001, he has led campaigns on the B-2 Spirit, B-21 Raider, LGM-35 Sentinel, and Nuclear Command, Control, and Communications in C3 systems. He transitioned into his current role in 2021, where he is now responsible for leading an integrated digital strategy across the Northrop Grumman enterprise. Mr. Tang holds a bachelor's degree in linguistics and anthropology from the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, an MBA from California State Polytechnic University, Cal Poly, and an engineering and leadership management certificate through the University of Southern California, USC. So let's all welcome Mr. Tang. Mr. Alex Gonzalez is at one of our companies here in Dayton. He's the lead solutions engineer for Tenet 3. He graduated from the University of Cincinnati with an undergrad in aerospace engineering and a master's in mechanical engineering. He worked at GE Aerospace for over 7 years with roles in hardware and software design and test in both military and commercial sectors. He joined Tenet 3 in 2023 in order to utilize his industry experience to guide MBSE product application. Let's welcome Alex. And down at the end, Mr. Kevin Hansen, who is the CTO of one of our providing sponsors here, MFGS Incorporated. Spanning more than 2 decades, Kevin has been driving the security and modernization of core mission systems across the public sector and helping government customers capture incremental value, accelerating digital transformation and IT mission dominance in line with organizational strategic objectives. with a focus on customers and experience, developing and executing IT strategies that run and transform hybrid operations, including DevOps, cloud migration, legacy application modernization, and cybersecurity. He is well positioned to help MFGS customers address their current IT challenges and achieve digital transformation success. Let's welcome Kevin, please.
Thank you.
All right, before we go any further, I'd like to open up the panel to just have each of the panelists tell us a little bit about what they're doing day to day in their digital space and their role in the digital space. So Mark, we'll start with you.
Day to day, that's one of the exciting things about being in this particular realm today. You really never know what. You kind of feel like you're the principal, right? You're going to where the problems or the challenges are. Day to day, what really my focus is on, and you heard General Richardson mention it, is trying to make sure we maintain that enterprise focus, right? We have a lot of exceptional work going on, and I'm sure you all do as well, in the traditional silos and the traditional programs and the traditional pockets. With Northrop Grumman, of course, you mentioned a couple of them with the B-21 Raider and LGM-35 Sentinel. Those are very well-resourced mega programs that, of course, are driving innovation and getting a lot of these tools and things. But what I try and make sure I focus on day to day is all the best practices and things that those very well-resourced, high visibility programs are doing, all the innovation and things coming out of them. We can pick up outside of those silos, scope and scale, regardless of the size of your program, and reapply those across any program, any sector, where applicable. And again, there's not a one-size-fits-all. We'll get into that in the discussion. But my day-to-day is really focused on kind of that rising tide lifts all boats, right? How do we make sure we're pouring as much water into that bay as possible so all the boats are lifting as quickly as possible?
Thanks, Mark. Alex, over to you. What does your day-to-day in the digital space look like?
Yeah, so at 10 at 3, we're a small company here in Dayton that focuses on cyber analytics. So we've got a bunch of data scientists, AI, ML experts, developing a bunch of really cool tools that my team on the solutions team uses to rapidly build MBSE complex system models. So my day-to-day is, how can we leverage these new and emerging technologies, work with customers to quickly get them over this MBSE hump and into the digital environment.
Thanks, Alex. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, so being the industry representative on the panel today, we are working every day directly with our customers. Certainly that represents the DoD and the IC community and the Air Force here in Dayton as well. Our team's supporting many different missions in the digital space, maturing the application delivery, software delivery environment, increasing cybersecurity across both legacy and new platforms, and making IT operations, digital operations, and making that manageable and enabling the workforce going forward to meet their strategic objectives.
Thank you. So kind of our journey this afternoon as far as questions goes, I'm going to ask each of the panelists specifically a question kind of aimed at their area of expertise. Then I'll ask a couple questions that go for all the panel, and if we have time, we'll open it up to audience questions. So Mark, a question for you, and feel free, other panelists, at the end of Mark's answer, if you have an answer that goes along with that, please feel free to bring that up. But Mark, how do you drive commonality across a wide portfolio of problems?
It's not easy. One thing I think that a pitfall is people hear the term commonality and they equate common with identical, right? The bigger your portfolio, the more diverse the systems you're doing, the more diverse your cultures, you're not gonna find identical ways of doing business across your company. It's just not gonna happen. But that common thread, right, that commonality, there are some foundational things that you can focus on. A foundational data and infrastructure, we all recognize the need for good foundational systems engineering, right? That is common across everybody in this room, regardless of what product, what system, what company. Now, there's different tools and things of which you can apply to achieve that, and that's going to depend on your ultimate objective? Are you building microprocessors? Are you building a nuclear penetrating low observable bomber? Are you building an MRAP? The process theory that I'll apply, but you're going to select the tools that are most efficient for your particular need, right? And so when you ask me about commonality, it's identifying, okay, what are the things that are just, things that we all have to address, right? And then from a company perspective, there are benefits, there are financial, strategic, and efficiency benefits of making some decisions, right? So from a commonality perspective, having that, and I'm so excited that we got to hear Dr. Herman before this, because a lot of the principles apply exactly directly what we're trying to do here, right? We're striving for collaboration, not for consensus. If we try and strive for consensus, we are never going to get there, right? So collaborate, you need to have strong leaders, right, that can drive that. But once you can do that, you can identify those foundational common elements and make some decisions. Here is the best tool for 90% of Northrop Grumman, right? That last 10% are going to fight tooth and nail of why they need something different. And they're probably absolutely right? But if you can make that decision to say 80 to 90% of my foundational tool set, and this is where it's kind of leading to, I'm going to try and avoid digital buzzwords, but I'm going to fail, so if you're playing bingo, get out your cards. That integrated digital environment, right, I refer as kind of that common toolbox. If I can provide every single person, all 98,000 employees in Northrop Grumman, the same foundational tools in their toolbox, 80% common, right? Think about, now I've got enterprise support for those particular tools, right, the toolbox, for startups, for new programs, regardless of whether you're a mega program like I keep saying GBSD, like a Sentinel program, or whether you're a couple $100 million, sub to somebody else. You have an immediate set of tools, you have an immediate environment you can operate in, right? And now you can focus your precious investment dollars or contractual dollars on customizing or tailoring that last 10 to 20% for your specific objective of needs. And it's challenging. I'm sure we'll get into the discussion, but the technology is the easy part, right? We do rocket science every day. It's the people and the culture and driving that, why it's good for them, not why it's good for us. How we're trying to help you do your job better, how we're trying to help you focus on your core skills and technology of what makes you passionate to come to work. That's what drives us to the next level. So when you ask me about commonality, it's providing the efficiency of that common operating picture, and the common tools and things that you can then build upon. Again, it's not the panacea, it's not the one size fits all solution. And then the one other piece I'll mention on commonalities, once you have that, think about the skill transitions that benefits you get, right? If you're transitioning from a program to another program, or from one sector to another sector, just like Dr. Herman was talking about, you could have never worked on a stealth bomber before, but if you're trained on those common set of tools, you have that 80% foundational knowledge, you can very quickly transition into that new role. So from a human resource skills perspective, there's tremendous benefit as well. So.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I love what you said about the culture and people and the development of our people is definitely one of our biggest challenges and one of our greatest assets when we overcome that challenge. So any other commentary from the panel?
I would just say from our perspective, from the business side, it was a business imperative for us to change the way we were delivering products and software to our customers. So this is going back to 2008, 2009, we recognized that there was a challenge there. So we were looking to, standards and frameworks like ITIL to help us improve processes, improve change management. We were looking at scaled agile frameworks, getting best practices advice around how to do what we needed to do to grow our business and protect our business moving forward. So we reached out to several customers and partners and built a consortium, included AT&T, included Shell, the petroleum company. We had Accenture and PwC be part of that. And what we really needed to build was a roadmap, an actual reference architecture that addressed the specific systems we needed in place and the data objects that interacted between the systems to optimize that application delivery process. So in about about 2010, 2012, we went to the open group and started the standard for IT for IT. We've continued to develop that standard. There's over 100 companies that are now participating in the development of that standard. If you go to opengroup.org, you can download that standard for free. You usually got to sign up to get an account, but they are a true standards company. They're not going to blast you with emails afterwards. And they give us that roadmap going forward to really compose the services that we needed to be successful in our own transformation. But we also recognize that our 40,000 customers have this same problem. One of our product segments is application delivery, application lifecycle management. So it was important that we include those customers in those discussions and start preparing them for digital transformation. And so we've continued to build that standard along with other members of the open group. More recently, in the last couple of years, we've started to adjust that standard specifically for the mission the DoD has and the IC community around digital mission dominance. So we've created a digital mission dominance model that our products are engineered to support, all in line, with the goals and objectives that people are trying to reach.
Thank you. Alex, I've got a question for you. What happens when a program doesn't have a place to start? What are the methods that you start with?
Yeah, so it's a really good example of a problem that a lot of people share, right? Everybody knows that you need to go digital. The problem is, how do you get started? Where am I going to get to? But our kind of approach at where I work now is you just got to start somewhere, right? As engineers, you kind of get obsessed with, what is my end target going to look like? What tool am I going to use? It has to be perfect. I have to do this, this, and this along the way. But the reality is you have to create a foundation first, right? Create this foundational model, this digital source of truth that everybody on your team can utilize and work from. And it's not going to be perfect right away, but that's okay, right? You'll realize that, I don't have this data, or I have a gap in this understanding. That just, in my mind, that just helps the team to, focus in more, right? Oh, I need to go get this cost data, this bill of materials data. Fill in those gaps, help build an understanding. But I think the key is, right, you just got to start somewhere. How do you do that quickly? What tools will enable you to do that quickly so you can try to play catch up? Because, all of large industry has very established processes and digital tool chains already established. So if you're not there already, right, you kind of got to get going, is my opinion.
Thanks, Alex. Kevin, having heard what the other two panelists said, how does it translate to software development to support strategies?
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit. It helps to have a roadmap, something that you can start with as you start to assess, the assets you have in your environment, the systems, the data, the people that you have in your environment. Analyze what's making the most impact. You want to, promote that activity that's having a large impact, make them MVPs, and then capture that knowledge, share that knowledge across your teams, to build from there. And point was made, start small, don't be afraid to fail, and iterate so that you get better over time and, develop more and more wins.
Thank you. So now a question for the entire panel, and feel free to jump in any order that you want to answer this question. But what's the biggest impact of implementing a digital strategy? What's the derived benefit of implementing that strategy? Not all at once.
I'll take the initial cut. And since he's not my direct boss, at the risk of contradicting General Richardson, there is one piece that I actually disagreed with him on, and that's where he said that he felt digital transformation actually might be a little bit overhyped. I actually take the opposite view, and I think very similarly to what we just heard from If You Learn from Freedom's Forge is you take a look at the objectives that the President of the United States set out that is required for the United States to achieve success. And nobody thought it was possible. He's putting out very lofty, almost unachievable goals. And you saw how the American industrial base blew through those almost 3-4 times in some of these areas. We have not even begun to scratch the surface of the true benefits of digital transformation. I can guarantee you nobody in this room really knows what that's going to look like until it really gets out there. Think about the intent of any new invention or any tool that's almost ever been generated, and how when you get it in the hands of the users will always surprise you in finding new and innovative ways of how to apply that tool. That is going to happen here, right? So we're already seeing benefits on a lot of the programs you're hearing a lot about in the press and in the news. What you're not hearing about is a lot of the benefits with the smaller ones, and what happens when you tie this data together, what happens when you can figure out effective data governance models across multi-levels of security, how you can have secure, reliable, responsible AI applied on top of that. I mean, you think about the explosion of what we are on the cusp of generating and driving across this industry. We can absolutely achieve the vision that General Richardson and the DoD leadership is putting out to accelerate. I mean, ultimately, it's all about optimization, acceleration, and really driving us ahead of the competition, not remaining at the speed of relevance, but really, kind of like exactly what you saw, what we did, in World War II and many of the other offsets before. This is the next major offset that will propel us ahead, and then the questions can be, okay, now what? So, a lot of the buzzwords, AI, you can check that off your bingo card. I was trying to say that one as well. But what we're doing here is provide that foundational technology and data layer, figuring out ways of how to access, manage, protect, whether it's classification or whether it's proprietary data from your companies. We are going to have to rethink how all of this is managed and how we do business. And when we crack that code, I mean, I think the benefits are going to be unbelievable. And again, we're already seeing evidence of that across the board in various pockets. So again, my personal and professional opinion is I think we have only begun to see the benefits, and we will all be probably woefully underestimating what the actual benefits will be when we realize this.
Alex or Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the immediate benefits is just it enables collective learning, right? Like, you can unify your whole team. How does this system I manage, how is it related to, from a finance sense, from a reliability sense, from a technological sense? Once you have this common operating picture, once you're in a true digital environment, one of the fallouts from that is just efficiency, right? Like, if everybody understands the system, understands the data flows between the system, you can really start to discover new workflows and new technological breakthroughs. So it's just, again, just a collective learning that it enables, I think, is very powerful.
Yeah, from our own practice in Digital Software Factory, I mean, there have been extraordinary benefits. Certainly, we were able to reduce costs. You get more proficient at adding value at each stage of planning to building, deploying, and running. You're driving value through those value chains as they go through those gates. And when the workforce contributes to adding value in meaningful ways, towards that goal of supporting the enterprise, that's empowering. That certainly empowers the workforce. They understand what their contribution is, they understand what that value they're delivering within their role, and how that value supports the overall, application or delivery. So certainly there's cost benefits, there's strategic benefits like speed to capability, but empowering the workforce is certainly one as well.
Thank you. Another panel for everyone. What lessons learned do you have from implementing your digital strategies? Obviously, we have a breadth of experience from small to large companies. So what have you really learned? What have you taken away from implementing those, both good and bad?
Yeah, so lessons learned. The key one that stands out is that there's more created value in overall alignment of your digital versus local excellence. It takes a while to get to that point because you're modernizing your technology, you're improving your processes, and you're training your people. So it takes a bit to get there. But keep that in mind, that that value that's created by driving it into all the phases of your delivery are a big part of what we learned.
Yeah, lessons learned for me, I would say, I mean, just to echo my first point, right? You can't be afraid to start somewhere. You gotta get into the digital world, you gotta get everybody unified, working towards the same goal. But to that end, right, just because you get into the digital world doesn't mean that you can't stop evolving, right? I mean, even at my last job, you know, a huge company with a bunch of well-established threads, but I mean, there were still cases where, you know, there's like Rev 38 of an Excel sheet being used as this important version control software, right? I mean, there's always room for improvement. I mean, you got to keep going. Just because you have Cameo, for instance, doesn't make you, you know, MBSE expert or truly in the digital realm. It's, are you truly utilizing the software to its fullest ability? Are you continuing to optimize your processes? So yeah, get started and then get going, I guess, or keep going once you get there, would be my lesson learned.
And I'll offer, I mean, the bigger the ship you're trying to turn, you know, the more time it generally takes, the more challenging it can be. So I think we all recognize a shared vision. You know, that vision should be very aspirational, and that's where I offer, I don't even know if we're as aspirational as we need to be, but we all have a vision. But having real objectives tied to that vision, I think, is a challenge. Right now, I think that people intuitively know there's a benefit, and we need to get there, and we have to get there, but a lot of people have their hard time putting their finger on what that objective is. And for, you know, our government customers in the room, that translates to requirements, right? You know, right now, it's hard to know what to ask for, and a lot of times if you ask for something too prescriptive, you're setting precedents that makes it really hard to adjust to adapt to what's coming next. So I'd offer a lot of lessons learned I've had is obviously, I'm gonna use a lot of key buzzwords here, somebody's gonna call it bingo on me, but vision, objectives, leadership commitment, strong leadership, right? If middle tier management has the best ideas, but you don't have the buy-in and firm commitment from your senior leadership, it's an uphill battle internally. And lastly, we are our own worst enemies. We love rebranding, we love acronyms, we love cool jargon, right? There's nothing really different about what we're doing now aside from trying to take existing tools and data, access and present them in ways that allow us to make better, faster, higher quality decisions, right? We're not inventing anything new. We're actually combining a lot of things that we already have together in ways that we haven't done before. I mean, think about the other transformational journey. I mean, the journey is a great example, actually. I like using the term of, think about what makes it evolutionary. I have this discussion all the time when I go out to my teams of, why are we wasting all of this money on this digital transformation? Isn't this just a natural evolution of technology? And to a point, you're absolutely right. There's a natural evolution of technology where it's iterative. What truly makes it transformational, it's gonna be transformational once. And at that point, it's just table stakes. This is the way we do business, right? What is that transformational piece here? And that is, as we talked about, data is king. It's a foundational technology and data layer, being able to access, present, and integrate that data so that we can get to it faster. We can make, again, better, higher quality decisions. We can generate the product more quickly. We can get ahead of our adversaries. We have real-time, if not predictive, situational awareness, right, through this. That transformational tick is really what's going to propel us to the next step. And then, of course, at that point, it's it's just the way we're all going to do business. We're going to go take a look back several years from now and think about, man, you guys were archaic back then in the 2000s, you know. So the lesson learned I took is really sort through the jargon, drown out the noise, break it down in the fundamental, achievable aspects, and get that common operating picture, that common vision, that drive, and just, you know, start knocking them out one by one. And again, it's I make it sound a lot easier than it is. We have some serious challenges we have to address from industry. What truly is proprietary? What do we have to protect, right? This is a key lesson learned I have. To truly unlock this, we have a lot of self-imposed barriers there for really good reasons that we need to rethink how we do. How does industry protect their crown jewels? What are our crown jewels, right? I bet if I asked everybody in this room, what do you protect that's proprietary? A lot of the companies, we are guilty included, slap proprietary in every single thing we put out, right? An org chart. I don't think it's too proprietary. Government, right? And Heighton was a great proponent of this, saying we overclassify everything, right? What truly needs to be protected? And if you think about, well, this is my last comment, I promise I'm droning on, but if you think about flipping the model on its head, we are in an industry where I am not sharing anything unless I know you have the clearance, you have the access, you have the need to know, right? Think about flipping that on its head and saying, I'm actually sharing everything, but I'm going to specifically identify things that I absolutely have to protect. Now think about what that opens up in terms of, again, all the things we talked about here. Access to data, governance, leveraging AI, machine learning, all of these things that our adversaries are beating us on. We really need to rethink how we do business and architect around that future vision.
Absolutely. I really like your model there, Mark, of flipping it on its head, where you open up, the aperture of what's available. I feel that, even from a government perspective, a lot of times, as you said, we overclassify, overprotect, even things that are, relatively harmless. So, without giving any specifics, or too many specifics, I'll say, can you talk about an exemplar that has implemented a digital strategy either in your company or someone congruent to your company?
Now, I mean, for us, again, referring to our success, and we managed to, address a lot of M&A activity in the last 10 years. So our portfolio expanded, more than doubled. Number of engineers more than doubled. The teams and the products that we had more than doubled. So over 300 products, around 10,000 engineers, over 350 different teams to bring into this. So with that, we managed to get our delivery times down from what used to be 18 months from ideation through planning, actually developing a solution, testing it, building it, and deploying it for consumption by customers. We now deliver builds every day across those teams. So that's a huge impact for our customers. But just from the digital factory perspective, again, just really one benefit. We also leverage shared services, the ability to create enterprise services based on all the iterations we've had over the years, to now leverage, shared components. We had tons of redundancy in that environment that we had to assess. We had to analyze, where's the value in this particular domain, and make some, hard decisions. Leading back to your 80-20 kind of analogy, what's 80% of the workforce going to be all right, and we can customize and address the 20%. Mm-hmm. So those are things that help reduce costs, drive efficiency, and create, value for those end users, for those who are actually consuming your services. So, tons of benefit in this undertaking. But how that comes to you is going to, depend on your environment. Every environment's different. So again, focus on those areas where you can make the biggest impact. We, with our MVP teams, started shifting them to different teams to do that collaboration and knowledge sharing, so that we'd accelerate kind of our journey to digital, if you will. So we've had a lot of success, and now our customers benefit from that.
Alex or Mark?
Yeah, so I think at Tenet 3, a good exemplar would be some recent work we've done with a program office to help them update and improve their process for generating a program protection plan. And if you guys don't know what that is, it's essentially a report or document that gets approved that says, hey, this electrical component or this information on this aircraft is critical and needs protected in some way. So in the old way of doing things, right, every time you do this program protection update, a bunch of subject matter experts get into a room, they argue over Word docs and PowerPoints and Excel files. They spend hours trying to enumerate and map out this complex system, right? And a lot of time is wasted. You question the accuracy. It's very inefficient. And then you get this document that's very important, right? Protecting what's critical in a system. So what we did is we try to transform this into a digital realm, right? So we take all this system documentation, we quickly generate a system model that enables the common operating picture for the whole team, right? Now you're not wasting time arguing over this is connected to this. You know it, you see it. You can reference it in the data, and you can make more informed decisions. You can run data analytics. You can utilize AI, ML techniques to analyze attack paths. And then you don't need to generate reports anymore, right? This is your digital source of truth going forward. If this aircraft has an update in the future, update the model, don't update the report. It's just been a really good example, of not something that's too crazy either, right? I mean, it's just transforming a system into a MBSE representation, and the benefits have been pretty profound.
Mark, any exemplars that you can talk about?
I mean, if you've been following Northrop, you've probably got exhausted hearing about all the Sentinel B-21 stuff, especially when Roper was in the seat. What you don't hear much about, which I'm actually more excited about, is, and I'll use my earlier example of this, this common tool chest, right? Our integrated digital environment. From a program startup perspective, from a cost avoidance, cost savings, schedule avoidance, I can hand any emerging program, whether they're on contract or not, that tool chest today, and they can be up and running. So they avoid the startup cost and startup time of having to go generate and build those tools and set that infrastructure themselves. I can give them that 80% solution. So, and again, a lot of that was built upon and leveraged from the big programs that you hear mostly about. What I'm most excited about is the hundreds of programs you're not hearing that, as we sit here today, are using that exact same toolbox, or are on that IDE, that are tailoring their own last 20%, maximizing their investment. And without getting myself in any trouble, obviously you can exponentially think about, if I'm talking about hundreds of those programs, we're talking about tens of thousands of Northrop Grumman employees and thousands of external partners that we have onboarded, both customers and suppliers as well. It's working. It's not perfect. It's working. We're seeing the benefits, and I encourage everybody to, I love the DAF DTO and DMM model of think digitally. And I'll challenge everybody in this room that's fully bought into DTO. I'm going to call Odie out here for a minute. He's probably getting mad at me and throw me the hard question. But notice the difference, Odie read our intros on the printed out paper documents. I don't know if you noticed, Kyle read the intro on his cell phone. How many people in here are taking paper notes that intend to go back and type them into your computers to share with your team, or verbally tell your team? How is that searchable when you get back to the office to say, hey, General Richardson mentioned this, right? When I joined the digital transformation office, I love it, I miss it. We were talking about this at lunch. My Filofax A5 planner, I still, we're talking about the satisfaction of being able to write something and cross it out and everything. So I challenge you to think, not just think digitally, but challenge yourself. Right? This isn't about making it easier for you, at least right off the bat. This is about making it more efficient. Think about how to leverage digital in your own personal lives and work lives to make anything you do more efficient, and you will start seeing things in much different ways.
All right, last question before we go to the audience. What is the one message you would want to get across to the government?
Yes, I can start with that one. I mentioned this earlier, but it just couldn't be more true, is that there's more value created by the overall alignment of your delivery systems than any local excellence. So, you need to work cross-domain with those folks who are planning, responsible for the portfolio, understand what you have. The developers, obviously, who are writing the software, committing that software to be tested. Even though we're trying to accelerate the delivery of these services, it's important not to forget quality. The quality has to be better than it has been historically. So, quality is a big part of it. And so, aligning, sharing information across those systems, aligning your resources and technology, again, to achieve the goals that as an organization you have is going to be a lot more rewarding to everyone involved, including, certainly those who are consuming those services, than any local excellence that's happening in a silo somewhere. So,
Alex?
Yeah, so I guess I don't know if you call it advice or request from the government, but I sound like a broken record, would be, again, just if you want to go digital, you gotta take the first step, right? Don't get wrapped around the axle worrying about perfect. Pick a tool you have readily available, try to utilize open data formats when possible. and just get a foundation, right? And then once you have the foundation, work with your team to grow it out and extend it to meet your guys' needs. But yeah, just start somewhere.
Mark?
I guess again, this is not surprising, kind of somewhat common sense, but at the end of the day, this is all about getting capabilities out to the warfighter, right? As fast and as capable as possible. So ultimately, it comes down to acquisition, right? With the intersection between government and industry is we got to put these things on contract. We got to figure out what we're going to do and how we're going to build it and deliver it. So and this is both sides, but specifically to the government, be sensitive to what data you need versus what data you're asking for. Kind of like we're talking about, we overclassify, companies overprotect. I think the government, and not just the government, all customers say, I'm not sure what data I need, so I'm going to ask for it all. I want unlimited rights, I want all access to your proprietary data that you've been investing in for the last 10 years. Do you really need that to modernize, sustain, and operate your systems? Arguably, no. So really think through how we deal with data in the future, because proprietary, especially as we go digital, that's going to be critical. And then lastly will be requirements, right? We really, I think, need to think through what is the ultimate objective, and it's that balance between being too prescriptive and not prescriptive enough. Think about if I were to say I want you to get this package from point A to point B, but there's snakes in the grass, so you're not allowed to go in the grass. That's very different than saying I need you to get point A to point B, and I need you to have absolute surety that the snakes cannot bite you, or that that the snakes will not affect you. So I can either go through the grass if I can demonstrate that I can be sure that there's no impact on impervious, or you have to stay on the road. I need you to take this path to this path, or I can fly. Think about how we word things to industry, because once that contract gets locked in, we're stuck, right? We have to deliver, and that's where you're seeing a lot of the questions of, well, how come this program's diverting from over here? Well, that program was put on contract 5 years ago. And now we're well down the path. You think about the speed of industry and trends and technology. That program either needs to be architected such it can be agile enough to adjust and adapt to follow along, or it has to be recognized that, okay, that one's stuck and we're going to move on to the next one. So the whole acquisition piece is going to be critical of making this work.
Thank you. I think we have a mic, so we have a couple more minutes on our panel. Any questions from the audience?
I got to stand up. My back. Thanks for the insight. I was wondering, I guess you guys have considered you've achieved the success of doing a digital implementation. So can you comment on how long you think it takes an organization to actually achieve success in implementing a digital strategy? And then is there one or two particular challenges you had that you really struggled in overcoming in order to do that?
I think if I heard that, was that how long it takes?
Yeah, that's what I heard, was how long it takes, and if there are any challenges, significant challenges along the way.
Yeah, like you guys have achieved the digital strategy. How long did how do you measure success of actually implementation of the digital strategy for each of your organizations? And was there something that you struggled in overcoming, which you did, and what was that?
I'll offer, at least from our perspective, I mean, given, we have 4 sectors developing multiple different product lines with customers across Air Force, Space Force, Navy, Army, other government agencies, there's no one size fits all, right? So that digital strategy, I don't say every, but the different product lines are in different phases of that journey, especially with their customers. And as I mentioned, we might have the perfect solution, but if our government isn't ready to put that solution on contract and acquire it, right, that's the LIMPAC, or vice versa. So I'm going to give you the typical, it depends answer, but it really does, and that's where I think you need to think through either, or I guess I will challenge you to think outside of that silo. So if there's a particular solution that a single program, or a division, or OU, or BU, or product line, or whatever it happens to be, the first question you'd be thinking of, as back to Odie's original question, is how much commonality do I have that I can leverage right, and start from. I don't have to recreate the wheel from the beginning, and then thinking to the future as well, and then how can I transition or leverage this beyond? So if I can take what program X did as my starter, I can advance that now in program Y. How do I make sure program Z can pick up my lessons learned, my best practice, what I invest in this, and feed that back in the system to learn? So it's somewhat of a non-answer to your question, I apologize, but I think that's a really difficult question to answer without fully understanding what are you trying to accomplish, where are you starting from, and what can you leverage to begin with? And it really fundamentally comes into what do I need, either data or material, to do my job? When I do my job, what am I going to produce? And who is going to be the recipient of that product? And what are they going to do, right? Because before it was just like, I'm an engineer, somebody tosses their piece over, I do my engineering, I toss it back over, I have no idea where it goes, right? We have to have a much better understanding of the upstream and downstream flow, especially when we talk about that I'm going to do it again. Promised myself I wouldn't do it. That digital thread, right? That unbroken digital thread. You have to have a much better understanding of your upstream, downstream capabilities and needs.
Anyone else?
It's just a more human response, but some of the challenges are, just getting alignment across all your programs, all your teams. Some developers think they can, sit in a dark room and code all day and just check their code in, and that's enough to get by. But it's not anymore. The collaboration is critical to the success of moving digital forward. So.
Yeah, I think a good metric on if you've been successful or not is it being used, right? That's how you tell if you've implemented your strategy well. I mean, we've done projects recently where we can get people over an MBC hump in 15 days, right? And that's a starting point. But then you learn that they weren't ready for the adoption, they're not using it anymore. It's essentially another stale tool in the chest. So in that case, I would call that, not success, right? You're not successful unless people are actually using this capability that you're giving them.
And there are many wins too. There's certainly challenges, but as you're facing those challenges, you're creating wins throughout the environment with the teams that are making progress. So, measuring those wins, giving credit to those wins, and empowering the folks involved with that help a lot to overcome some of those challenges.
Thank you. I think we have another question.
I think I got buzzword bingo, and I was debating
the battery out of your mic.
What's that? I was debating asking Odie a really, really hard question, but instead I'll keep it with the panel. So I wanted to pull a thread on one of Dr. Herman's kind of keys to success that he said today on focusing on production rather than process. And so in that same vein, what kind of metrics or statistics are you guys tracking within a company or within projects you guys have to show kind of that you're marching along and getting to that success on implementing your strategies?
So I think if I understood it was what kind of metrics are you using around metrics? So what kind of metrics are you using to measure your success of implementing digital strategies?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to software and delivery of software, certainly you're identifying friction and measuring the cost of that friction throughout your digital value chains. What's the flow rates, and are they improving as you make changes and improvements continuously to the environment to expedite delivery? What else? Where's waste? Where are we leveraging redundant components that aren't needed? Where are we not leveraging our buying power as an organization because of that redundancy? Others? Any others, guys, to add? Or?
Yeah, from my biased MBSE perspective, right? If I can see active users of the tool, if I can see a whole team not using it, that would, for me, would be a metric of whether I was successful or not. Or if I know the purpose of a digital tool, right? How good is that tool? How well is that a tool achieving that goal, I guess, right? If I have a tool and that's supposed to enable cost management or PLM, what efficiency metrics have gone up as a result of my digital tool? That's what I would look at.
Yeah, and I agree with what my both fellow panelists said, especially with the optimization and waste. If you think about data and tool integration and thinking and going digital, one of the things, and again, depends on the function as well, but if we're specifically talking about the actual, I think Kyle's question was focus on the product, of actually getting that product out the door. If I can reduce the number of tools in my toolbox, I've got, let's say I've got a dozen Phillips head screwdrivers, and I realize that I can achieve 90% of my business with 2, and the program that needs that one special one, we'll buy that for them, but now I've reduced from maintaining 12 tools to now to 1 or 2. And then you add the digital element on that, and the integration complexity with each tool you add. Not every tool has to be integrated with every tool, but it gets exponentially more complicated with every single tool you add. 1 to 2 is interesting. 1 to 2. 1 to 3 gets more complex. Those 3 to another 4, it rapidly becomes the spider web. So really thinking through that disciplined data governance and architecture, and then mapping that, eliminating tools essentially, eliminating the waste, and then to your point, tracking those adoption metrics is key, right? Who's not using it and why? And there might be good reasons, or there might be, I am a 30-year grizzled engineer and I can just wait you out. I've seen it happen time and time again. I'm not going to use your tool. This is what I like. This is what I'm using. And I just got to wait you out, and this digital thing's going to go away, right? So that change management, touching the human people aspect is again, as I mentioned earlier, the technical part is actually the easy part. Yeah. It's really driving that cultural change in the time we need to drive it. That is going to be, the key success criteria, whether we make it or not.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's all the time we have for this afternoon. So let's give a round of applause once again to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Great job. Great job. Thank you.
I just want to say ditto the whole time. Me too.
Hello, my name is Joni Ehlers, and I'm with Definitive Logic. I sit on the FCA committee, and I want to thank Kyle Hurst in the DTO office, Kristen Falcolata, and Teresa McElroy for all their leadership in creating 2 days of activity. Without their leadership, our committee would not have been able to continue the process in creating our 2 days of content for this week. But I also want to thank Kohler Catering for keeping us full for the past 2 days. And I don't know about you, but I liked the snacks yesterday, so I'm looking forward to that this afternoon again. And then I'd also like to thank the Dayton Arcade for a fabulous venue. Even though some of us have had to put on our sunglasses today, I've enjoyed the sun coming through for our days of content. We have, Definitive Logic has over 20 years of experience delivering mission impact consulting and technology solutions. Our domain expertise spans across defense, intel, and federal civilian markets. We deliver performance-based, tailored, innovative solutions of the highest quality, and we deliver outcomes and ROIs at the intersection of business, process, and technology. As an annual Diamond sponsor for our Dayton-Wright FCA chapter, I now have the distinct honor to introduce the panel. They are talking today about instilling our digital-first culture, and leading the panel as the moderator is Sam Morgan with Accenture Federal Services.
I know, thank you, Joni. All right, come on up, crew. Yeah, now I actually get to talk about something, but I'm really here just to kind of corral these wonderful people, so. All right, well, thanks for welcoming us back. This time I do get to actually participate, so I'm excited about that. So we've got with us today, they're going to introduce themselves, so I'm not going to talk very long here. We'll get into their kind of opening statements, then we'll jump into some questions. Feel free. I think they're all willing to be interrupted for questions if they're just got to get asked, so please feel free to do that. But so for the past day and a half, to 2 days, we've heard from leaders and experts on digital transformation, right? The technology. We had a great panel this morning on education and training. which touches on culture. Right? We're going to talk about culture here today. Leaning into the people side this morning, and so that today we're going to focus all on culture. So what does that mean? How do we get into that? How does it help, hurt? All those kinds of things. Now there's a phrase I'm sure most folks in here have heard, right? It's Peter Drucker was attributed to this, but I don't know if he actually said it or not. But it's that culture trumps strategy every time. In fact, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So that doesn't mean that strategy is bad. In fact, all the stuff we've talked about to date at the conference has been critically important, right? You can't do transformation, you can't do the mission without all those things. But at the same time, if you're not assessing, or at least assessing and addressing cultural change needs, then could thwart all your digital transformation plans. So I'm excited for this to be kind of where it is towards the end. You've heard a lot of good stuff, and now we kind of get to bring it home with that last bit. So without any further ado, we're going to get into the panelists, and I'll let them introduce themselves kind of from this way and talk through it. So thank you.
All right, awesome. Thanks for having me here, guys. So my name is Jason Rapith. I'm a senior manager with Deloitte, work in our human capital practice across the DoD. Most of my time's in the Air Force. I was a Army infantry officer before I came here, so bear with me. I'm definitely the dumbest person in the room. Did my undergrad in computer engineering, so kind of a tech guy, but my work is really at the intersection of what I call the people side of digital, as is probably most of the panel here. And so just very excited to be here with you guys today and kind of share where we think sometimes we forget, right? We get very focused on the technology and we kind of forget about the other parts, and that really tends to be the limb fact in a lot of organizations. So really excited to have the conversation and talk through what we've learned over time and answer some questions.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allison Fisher. I'm also a senior manager within Accenture Federal Services Human Capital Practice. I spend most of my time with the Department of Veterans Affairs, which some of you may or may not have heard of. But they are a massive organization undergoing any number of digital transformations at once. So I, like Jason, similar approach, focus on that people side of transformation with a focus on adoption and kind of long-term sustainability. So excited to be here. Thank you for having me, and look forward to the discussion.
Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Deal, and I represent the commercial side. So I am the Senior Vice President of Global Customer Operations at LexisNexis. And in my role, I think I was invited because I have the digital transformation tattoos, or some might call them scars, because I live and breathe digital transformation every single day. I have an organization of about 700 people that's made up to look like probably a lot of your teams. I have people that are LexisNexis lifers that have been there for 35 years, all the way down to people who just started today. So we have been on the journey. We are on the journey currently. I look forward to just sharing my perspective, some of the challenges I've seen in organizations as they approach digital transformation, and really, what does success look like in that space? How do you measure it, and how do you make sure that it's sustainable? So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Monica. Jason Corman, I'm CEO of Gaping Void Culture Design Group. And I always feel like in these environments, the first thing I have to do is apologize in advance if I offend anybody. And so we have a series of principles that we operate under in terms of how we look at transformation. And we believe that, as Sam alluded to, that culture is the key to all types of transformation. And we spend a lot of time thinking about process improvement when we should be thinking about the human-centered side of things. And so in our world, we think that humans are not very rational, and I think we all experience that, but we tend to be in denial about it, that data and knowledge do not change human behavior, and that culture is a social construct. And once we get to terms with those principles, we can actually design for any environment for transformation. Our background in the DoD is we started off at Edwards Air Force Base in AFWERX in 2018. We moved on, and we've been supporting the DTO office here for a couple of years, and we also are working over at the Chief Digital and AI office over at the OSD, and in our non-DoD work, we work in places like MIT Sloan, healthcare, large retail environments, and cosmetics, which has a lot to do with the DoD, in fact. Same principles. So, Sam, back over to you.
All right, well, thanks Thanks, folks. So let's get into some questions. We've got some teed up, but I will say, again, feel free to ask. They may interrupt each other. We'll see what happens here, okay? So Jason, you first. Before we get too far into, ahead of ourselves, in an earlier panel, digital workforce was discussed, but how would you define a digital culture? What are we talking about?
Yeah, and so this is one of those pre-teed up questions because I always like to talk about this. And when I work with AFMC, with SAF, with ACC, with 16th Air Force, and when we talk to them, they're like, "Hey, I want to be digital, right? I want to have a digital transformation. I'm going to do all these things." Like, cool, fantastic. I want all of those things for you as well. What the hell does that mean? Like, what do you actually think you're going to accomplish? What does success look like to you? And they normally start, and I get two responses. One is they kind of just look at me like I grew a third eye, and they're like, "I don't know, it's just digital, man. What are we talking about?" And then the other is, "Oh, well, I'm going to migrate to the cloud. I'm going to start using AI. I'm going to go to zero trust. I'm going to do these things." And I want all those things for you because they are fantastic tools. But what we tend to focus on is say, that's like putting a new coat of paint on an old house, right? Like, yes, it will look good for a little bit, but the electrical's still shot, the pipes are still leaky, the drywall is cracked, and in a little bit, it's going to break. How many of us have been through, I think other Jason on there mentioned this, right? We've all been through a transformation, and in 6, 7, 8 months, we're like, wait a minute, I feel like I'm still where I started, right? A bunch of things changed, but nothing actually changed. And so what I want to encourage us to do as we talk about this is, my kind of thesis statement is digital is a mindset. We did some work with MIT where we looked at organizations who have been through this, and they wrote a book on it called The Technology Fallacy. It ain't about the tech, folks. Right? Tech is an accelerator, it is gasoline in the engine, but it is not the engine. What makes a difference, well, we found organizations that do this really well, right? They democratize information, they have real-time data on demand, they power down decisions to the lowest level, right? They're what we call your digital DNA, right? These traits that make you a digital organization. I can do that with a pencil and a piece of paper if I have to. Technology helps me move faster, but a lot of us have given orders on the back of a Humvee with cardboard and a Sharpie, right? Like, you can do this, the technology just gets you there faster. So what I really want us to drive on is how we organize, operate, and behave. Those are the things you have to change if you want to be digital. Otherwise, again, it's just, I'm going to put a shiny new wrapper on all the underlying problems of my organization. Mm-hmm. So that's how I would define it. That's how we define it when we talk to people. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts, but it starts here before it starts on your keyboards.
I think everybody they want the silver bullet,
yep.
Right? They want, it's tough to go and look at your organization, and sometimes there's limiting factors. I know for VA, the union culture makes it very difficult to do, right? But spending the time to really invest in that particular area of what do you really want this to look like? What does your organization need to move through that progression? You cannot skip that step. As much as you want to be well, I just want to do this and it's going to be cool. To your point, the paint's going to chip. So I think that's hard work, and it sometimes is a significant investment, but it is worth it, and it does return.
Yep.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I agree with them both. I think it's hearts and minds all the way. I mean, you can't start this unless you have a very clear vision around how you're bringing people along with you. Otherwise, you are making an investment in people and in technology that doesn't pay off in the long run. Mm-hmm. So it really is hearts and minds.
Yep.
Yeah. Sam, the only thing I would add is that if we really are seeking transformation, and lots of people will talk transformation, but that's not what they really want. What they want is 2 degrees better than what you've got. But if you really want transformation, you have to be willing to put tension on the system to break the old habits and break the old mindsets. And Jason, you mentioned mindsets. There's a whole collection of mindsets that drive the shift in performance. And we deal a lot in this idea of belief systems, which is a collection of beliefs and mindsets and mental models. But those shifts in that thinking actually collapses into new behavior. And if you're not willing to reprogram that belief system, you never get transformation. Mm-hmm. And so it's not, polite conversation does not get you there.
Yep. No, thank you. Those are great. So shifting to Monica, kind of pulling on some of that thread of obstacles, right? As you mentioned, you are the commercial representative, in this space. You're not currently working with the federal government. So you've likely had more time observing in your role, digital transformation and attempts at it over the years, right? So what have you seen as some common obstacles, and kind of how have you overcome those?
Sure. I'm in the arena. So like I said, I have the battle wounds from seeing it, and I see there's probably 3 areas I would say that are really common obstacles for people. Number one, I hinted at a minute ago, which is defining what you're really trying to do. Why do you want to transform digitally? Are you trying to make people's jobs easier, faster? Are you trying to produce capacity? Are you trying to be a differentiator? You want to attract like top talent, and people want to be using more digital systems and things like that? Or number 3, are your systems broken? Are you on the edge of things not performing where they should be? Are they performing slow? Are they inhibiting people from doing work? You have to start right there, because you're not going to bring people along unless you really know what your end goal is and why you're doing it, and prioritizing between those 3. The second part of that goes into that winning hearts and minds. Once you have that message, then you're able to go out and show people how you plan on moving forward and making their jobs better, how you're going to help them attract talent, or how you're going to replace existing legacy systems with something that's going to be better, that's going to help them move faster in their day-to-day. The third obstacle, and I hope there aren't procurement people in the room, I would tell you, is not buying the cheapest. I'm not here to sell you anything. I do digital transformation in my role. And once you get people to buy in to the vision, to buy into where you're going, and to buy into the technology, if you go out and buy the base model of this technology, and they're constantly having to come back to the well to ask you for features or functionality, that's not the benefit of technology these days. It's having things at your fingertips that will allow you to integrate it and make it your own for your specific job. That's what AI does for us. That's where things get driven forward. So my advice, you don't need to buy, the absolute finest Ferrari version of what you're looking for, but don't go in with those base models, because you're not delivering to people the experience that they're gonna want from technology that you're implementing. So apologies to procurement that might be in the room, but it's buying season, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, you got some thoughts on
So
that?
are you suggesting that you start with why do you need the transformation?
Absolutely.
And that's that you're aligning to?
Yeah, I think you have to have that to deliver the message out to your organization.
Okay. So that's sort of based on logic, based upon business outcomes, correct?
Sure.
Okay. And then how do you get them to buy into that?
Oh, by showing them how they personally tie into it.
Beautiful.
So it's the personal message behind it.
Okay.
But what matters to me. Nobody cares about anything except what it matters to them.
Exactly. Okay, cool. So, by the way, all the procurement people are busy doing year-end work right now.
You're right.
So I think they're at their desk.
My bad.
So
The Lord's work.
And we appreciate you doing it. Thank you.
Keep working. You're good.
I still have a mortgage to pay. Appreciate it.
So okay.
Thank you.
Over to you, Sam.
Good. Awesome. And thanks for sharing those obstacles. And we'll get more into kind of scaling and how it affects mission for this audience here in a little bit. So, Allison, for you this time. So, we've talked about why it's hard, why it's challenging, but why is it important that we care about adopting a digital-first culture? Why should we care?
There's a number of reasons. I think we've done some research that I think it's something like 80% of Fortune 500 companies believe that they need to make some type of digital transformation in order to remain market relevant, in order to kind of achieve their growth goals. That's just the nature of the situation that we're in. And when you talk about public sector organizations, when you talk about the services, it becomes a battle for talent, right? VA is facing this. I'm sure that the services are facing this too with the all-volunteer force, right? It becomes where you need to create experiences that are on par or better than, in some cases, with your competitors. And I think a lot of times in the public sector, we don't kind of think about being competitive with the commercial sector, but in a way that's where we are. So these digital transformation efforts are not just an effort to do things faster or more efficiently, but it's also in the spirit of providing an exceptional employee experience, providing like a place for people to continue to grow and learn that is not, I say paper-based only as like an analogy for like a non-digital first culture. I'll highlight an example because it's really relevant for VA. And VA is the largest integrated healthcare system in the world. And they serve about 9 million veterans annually. That's a lot of people. Their hospitals just put out, or OIG just recently put out a report that said that 90% of VA facilities are facing a dire shortage of workers, right? And with that data in hand, I mean, and VA's been tracking towards that for some time, but they are now investing in more virtual first tools and their ability to serve people in a virtual capacity first, and with the assumption that they're gonna be able to tackle or handle a certain percentage of issues in that virtual encounter versus having to have people, come into a VA facility to receive that care. And VA is competing with services from the private, healthcare services from the private sector. So it's, we're seeing that behavior more and more where it's where they want to create this exceptional user experience or customer experience and this exceptional employee experience to keep the talent that they need to achieve their goals. And again, it always comes back down to people, right? It's not necessarily the technology, it's about how do you serve people in all capacities better through these types of digital transformation efforts.
Jason, you want to add to that?
Yeah, and what I think is really interesting is, and Jason, you brought it up earlier, so I'm going to steal some greatness here, right, is like, we have to drive to the, again, like you said, people are not rational actors, right? Like the analogy one of my coworkers who I really love, and I stole this from him, is, are you a self-help book or a personal trainer, right? Like, yes, when you ask those CEOs, those Fortune 500, everybody says, yeah, I want to be more digital, right? Yeah. The same way a self-help book is going to tell me, yeah, if I drank less booze and I worked out more and I got more sleep and I ate more salads, like I'd be in better shape, right? Like what I need is a personal trainer to come flip over the mattress at 5 a.m. and say, yo, fatty, start running, right? Like get moving. So I think, to the buy-in part and to the rational actor part, it's sooner or later you just have to break something, right? Because most organizations, we all work in the Air Force, right? They see it and they say the words, this is what I want. What are you willing to do to make that happen? Mm-hmm. And I think that's where sometimes we fall short is, it's that meme you see on LinkedIn, right? Who wants things to change? Who wants to be a part of the change? Nobody, right? So I think it's just so powerful. Like you said, you have to drive there. Mm-hmm.
So I'll just double click on that. I think that one of the really difficult issues that we see in the Air Force is this tasking environment where people have to go do.
Yeah.
But
go transform.
There is not a lot of consideration for the quality of the execution. The question is just, was it done? And in that environment, quality goes downhill quickly. Sorry, I almost used an expletive. So, so the point is that we have to create an environment where people deeply and emotionally understand what the standards are that they're required to work towards. And to your point earlier, you got to answer the question of what's in it for them. Mm-hmm. And if you can't answer that, then you will never be able to motivate and inspire people to get out and do great work. It'll always be, I just got to get through this task. So, over.
Yeah, and that's actually up to the next question for you. I think you started to get there. So how do we craft this environment? So hearing that there's challenges and there's these barriers, got a definition, we know that it's important, so now how do we start to do this? And specifically, how do we do this in a way that makes the digital natives who are already ready to go and bought in productive, but bringing everybody else along and driving the transformation along with it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we've noticed is that there's a default I would say first, what we have to do and help people do in their work is find more meaning. And in the DoD environment, meaning equates to mission. And there's a problem with that from our observation, which is, yeah, everyone's showing up for the mission, but we still don't answer that question of what's in it for me, right? How am I personally benefiting from the things that I'm doing? How do I feel about the work? How am I treated? Do I feel like I make a difference? There's an old friend of ours, a guy by the name of Graham Weston, who built a company called Rackspace down in San Antonio from nothing to a couple $1 billion in sales. And he used to say that what we all want to be is valued members of a winning team on an inspiring mission. So the mission's inspiring, but the other two parts of that, super problematic. Mm-hmm. And what we see is that a lot of the most senior people in the Air Force are disincentivized to actually change the way things are done, because the system works great for them. It's perfect, right? And they got to where they are because they played that game. So we've got to change that game, and that, that tracks directly to how do we shift a culture where people can find more meaning and more connection in the work they do every day. And so, okay, that is designable. We can design that. Mm-hmm. We got to think about, where are we today? Where do we need to go? How do we connect people emotionally to that new outcome? And emotions matter, and they matter in work more than the facts, because people are hardwired to actually pay attention to how they feel about things. And feelings often are a dirty word. Yes, in this environment, they're a dirty word. But hey, we all got them, and they all matter to us. So we really have to think about, how do we change the feelings people have about their work, how we think about recognition, how we connect them to more meaning and purpose. And that is really about designing new belief systems that drive that new way of thinking. And so there's a lot of discussion happening now from the highest levels of the Air Force about transformation, the way things have to change. General Alvin, we attended General Richardson's leadership conference back in April, and General Alvin gave this great 20-minute talk, and he basically said, look, we have to respect the past by departing from it. We have to recognize that AFIs are instructions, not mandates. And he really was signaling the fact that transformation has to be on everybody's minds. The doing of that, very difficult, and digital is one of the ways to do it. But what we have observed over the years is that when we talk about digital transformation, when we talk about innovation, when we talk about resiliency, when we talk about any type of human change, actually, it's pretty much all the same principles, just applied to different problems. So, over.
Good. Yeah. No, thank you.
There's one thing I would add to that, because I think your question was around, what do you do for people who are not digital natives? They didn't come up in this technology. My 35-year-old customer, or 35 years at LexisNexis customer support agent, that has no intention of seeing us change digitally, or doesn't really care because they see retirement in their future. Like, why would they want to change? Why would they want to do that? I think the first thing you have to recognize is that some people aren't going to come along on the journey. They're just not. And to try to act like you're going to have sweeping acceptance is a fallacy right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to bring them along and allow them to continue doing their work in a way that contributes, while you take your early adopters, you take those people who buy in, and you move them forward faster. But I just want to add, when it comes to non-digital natives, we have to just be really clear that we're not going to get everybody to buy into the philosophy. Sometimes it's going to be a moving train, and we're going to have to find a place for them that allows them to continue to contribute while we move the rest of the train forward.
Yeah, I have an alternate, sorry, Jason. Please. Have an alternate sort of version of that, which is when you shift the culture to one where there's adoption of that, a deep desire to adopt those new digital tools, and people's beliefs and mindsets align to that, what you wind up doing is pushing the people who do not want to be part of that out. And that is a really powerful tool. And we see it happen all the time. Mm-hmm. By defining it and being clear about it and being able to have a very direct conversation about where we are going, there's a whole bunch of people who go, actually, this isn't for me anymore. And they go. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. And again, you got to break some eggs to make an omelet. Yeah. And things don't change without tension, and that's just an example of how it works sometimes. Jason?
Yeah, and I think driving towards, sometimes we often conflate two things, behaviors and beliefs, right? we always, when we talk to our clients, right, it's, I'm trying to influence behavior, right? I don't know what's in your heart. I don't know what's in your head. I don't know if you're a jerk or a dirtbag or a fantastic person. I can't control that. That's where you came from, where you grew up in, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, cat, dog, whatever. What I can control is I can incentivize the behaviors that I want in my organization. And then you can retrofit into the belief system, right? All of us learned what we learned from somebody. So I can't control whether you want to be a digital native or not, or whether you like this or not. What I can try and do is I can create a framework in my organization and a culture that says these are the things that we reward and that we incentivize, and you get the, the food pellet when you do these things, and these are the things that come with consequences. Right. And then some people, then you can change that underlying behavior, which then may change underlying beliefs or values, right? Or maybe it doesn't. Maybe they hate it the entire time, but at least they're coming along for the ride. Or like you said, maybe they decide this isn't a place for them, and that's sometimes sad, but sometimes also a necessary evil.
So that's a great point, and there's a concept we play with a lot, which is this idea that change makers leave incongenial regimes and move to congenial regimes. And you see that with people fleeing DoD, going to the private sector, which often aren't that congenial either, but okay, whatever, another discussion for another day. But the point is that the explicitness in the culture you're designing is really important, because if you don't make it safe for the people who want to make change happen, then what you have is they leave, and the old sort of bureaucracy, if you will, of stasis takes over. And so there's a tension there that has to be dealt with, and that is probably the most difficult part for leaders, like the willingness to actually, and the appetite to deal with those things. So.
Yep.
Cool. Any questions from the audience so far? I know it's probably the people have the mic, but any questions so far? We do still have time to get questions at the end too, but any burning questions, we'd stop now. So, all right, cool. We'll keep pressing. So Jason, back to you. On the idea of operations and on the idea of mission, kind of picking up on that thread, why does having the right culture matter? Specifically, we're thinking about, how does it help us win in a peer competition?
Right, I mean, that's the word of the day, right, is we are moving out of 20, almost 30 years of asymmetric threat into, the near peer fight and being ready for that. So, again, I spent a couple years in the Army. I see some uniformed folks here, right? I was one of those people trading paint with the bad guys. And I can tell you what I think you probably already know. Like, just having the right people and the right culture in and of itself is not going to win the next war, but it can sure as hell lose it, right? History is littered with armies that had better technology, better tools, better systems, larger logistical industrial base, and got their butts handed to them when they didn't have the right underlying features. Now, yeah, there's a lot of geopolitical strategy that goes with that too, so I don't want to oversell it, right? But I thought the conversation earlier that Dr. Herman gave, which I was able to listen to part of, we talked about, hey, how the industrial base of the U.S. rose up to answer that call, and that's a huge part of it. I was a paratrooper, right? If anybody's jump qualified or pushed Army guys out of an airplane, hi. You want to talk about an organization that is all culture, right? Give a 19-year-old kid a backpack and a rifle and throw him out of an airplane in the middle of the night and say, I hope you know what you're doing. That's what it is. And if you watch Band of Brothers or study the history, right, that type of organizational culture is what we want. Those guys hit the ground. Are you in my unit? Are you in my unit? Which, I don't know, you, and me. We're all going to go take the objective. We're going to crawl through glass, and we're going to go over, under, around, through any obstacle, and we're going to figure it out. They didn't follow policy. They didn't follow direction. Their uniforms probably weren't to regulation, right? That didn't matter, right? So, that's why we call it the greatest generation, right? It was that culture, right, of I'm going to solve the problem by any means necessary. And they innovated when they didn't have the tool in front of them they needed. They innovated it. So when we look at the OIs and the stuff that SecAv's putting out, right, and I know the Chief of Staff just down at AFA, for those of you who were there last week, talked about, great power competition. Yes, we need the best jets. We need air superiority. We need the best missiles. We need the best cybersecurity systems, 100%. But A weapon system is useless without the right team, organization, culture, process behind it to pull the trigger when it's time and actually make it happen. And if you don't believe that, again, crack open a history book and look at all the times that having the right stuff and the right technology didn't make a lick of difference.
I think there's also like having that the trust and psychological safety, right? Like it's where I've always admired, I think, the unit structure within the military, because there's a trust there. There's like a, hey, like we're going out and we're going to accomplish X, Y, or Z, but I know that you have my back and I have yours. And you almost have to create that kind of culture within any change within an organization too. I have to feel safe in knowing that if I'm like really lost or like really pissed off about what's happening, or something worse than that, that I have a place where I can go like let that out and feel that somebody's at least like listening to me today, even if they might not like take that feedback and integrate it moving forward. But we're seeing that a lot even internal to our organization, right? And especially I think with the younger generation of workers coming in, they are looking for that. They want to know, like, yeah, although feelings tends to be like a tough concept, like they're asking for that, and they're saying like, hey, listen, no, like this is really important to me, and if you don't have it here, I'm gonna bounce. Yep. So like that psychologically safe environment in which to like try and fail and not be like penalized for attempting to follow good behavior, right? Or attempting to change your behavior, I think is also super important, because like, yeah, you were thrown out of a plane, but it's also about knowing that your unit's kind of following protocol in pushing you out of that plane, and then when you get on the ground, there's protocol there too. Like that's there, and that's what kind of hopefully helps it so you don't freak out mid jump.
So I would like to double click on something you alluded to, which is, and I've never been in the military, I've never been in battle, but the one thing that is that you have to be part of a deeply connected team, and you have to operate as one, and it's life or death. And the thing is, when people get back to the office, it's the opposite. It's a zero-sum game. Someone's losing and someone's winning, usually or often at other people's expense.
Yeah.
And so it completely breaks the dynamics of teamwork, and it completely creates an environment where people very often are out for themselves. And did I get that, the check mark next to that objective, right? Did I beat somebody else out for promotion? And we really need to rethink how we structure the environment where people are incentivized to actually help each other do better. Yeah. Because unless we do that, we're never going to get a cohesive we're never going to get a cohesive bureaucracy where people are actually helping each other do better.
Yeah. I mean,
totally.
I just got to laugh because I work a lot in the EIT space, so I'm up at Hanscom Air Force Base, and we're like, so they added a few more of them now. Like, we joke and we used to call it, the 5 families of EIT, like it's the frickin' mafia, right? Well, we all know how that ended if you've seen The Godfather, right? Like, it didn't exactly get along, and it's exactly that, right? It has to stop being a zero-sum game. It has to be we're in this together instead of,
well, yeah,
I win, you lose.
Yeah, Ms. Vidrine talked about that this morning a little bit, and one of the questions, I can't remember who asked it, was about, this is all the pick your organization, all the Air Force's data. How do we mandate? How do you encourage sharing across the walls? Is it similar? It's an enterprise concept of what you're talking about here. Right? How do you not get people in trouble for doing what's right, even if it's not what's been right in the past? So, no, good discussion, and thank you for that. So, I want to leave. So we've talked about challenges. We've talked about barriers, why it's important in regards to the mission, and I do. So Monica and Allison, or anyone, and honestly, what are some examples from our experience here where right was done, where it actually happened? Maybe if you could give us some insight into a couple of the reasons, a couple key reasons for why it worked, and how we can take away some positivity out of here.
Sure, I can jump in. Maybe it's because I'm in operations, so like we measure everything under the sun. I mean, that is like my bread and butter, is how things are measured and how they get better from that point. So when I see people do this successfully, they have really good success criteria in place that they're measuring against constantly, because that's how you keep pulling people into the fold as you're transforming, is showing them where it is successful, how it's being successful, where it's adding time or efficiency for these people who have implemented it. So I'd say to be successful, and where I see it is where they have those really tight success measures. I also see it be successful when you don't fold on the strategy when you first get the pushback. Because that's where I see so many organizations fail. It's like they are hyped up, they know why they want to do it, they're ready to talk to their folks, they know what it means for them, but they get tomatoes thrown and they immediately fold and start re-questioning what the strategy is. And that's not strategy. If you believe in digital transformation and you're pushing it forward and it's something that you passionately believe in, then you get all the tomato throwers in the room at the same time and have them throw them all at once. Like, I want to hear from them all, because if I can address their concerns in that room with the people who are adamantly against this mission and what I want to push forward, then I can turn them back out of the room and people won't believe it when they're talking to them. So I think that those are the two key things, is consistently measuring and knowing what success looks like, and what you're measuring and how you show it, and then stick to the strategy. Don't let those first inclinations of pushback really hold you from pushing forward.
Thank you.
And I had like a really good joke, which was, I support the VA, and I don't know that I have anything positive to share in terms of digital transformation, but that's not really true. I think that there have been pockets of success in the places where like all of those things are true, and there is like just that kind of I don't know how to say this, like this like organic commitment to it, right? Like that's not imposed. It's like very much a, wow, the way we do this like truly sucks, and like we really should do something about it, right? So it's like a really like deep embedded need, like felt need for change. And I've seen a lot of improvements, I think, in the VA's IT organization and their ability to change internally so that it can serve as that support function for the rest of the organization. So I do want to give them some props there. And then I would say, going back to the kind of virtual first example, I think VA has done, and it continues to do, a very good job at serving the edge cases. And I say that in the sense of like VA is a big rural health like organization too, and this like kind of virtual and digital imperative was first adopted from these like very remote like outpatient clinics in the middle of nowhere, because it was their lifeline. And so again, like if you're talking about like an inherent like kind of just ability to improve in the way that you serve customers, and it being like it happens to be digital, like that's been like really successful for them, where it's just like, hey, I didn't know that this was an option to be, but now that it is, we're 100% in, and we will tell everybody about it, type of thing.
That's good.
So.
Thank you.
So I'm curious about the success criteria.
Yeah, tell me.
Because I find that very often, there's a great book actually called The Tyranny of Metrics. I highly recommend it. And the thing is that the organizational success criteria very often doesn't matter to people. And I'm wondering, when we talk about how we connect people to emotionally to success criteria, I mean, how do you do that through the metrics? Is it?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty easy question. When I talk about success criteria, we're absolutely tying people back to the mission, because I'm talking about things about the customer experience, because customer experience is one of the things that, is a little softer, but it's the thing that we want our employees focused on most. So when I talk about us implementing digital technology, a lot of it's tied back to those outcomes. What do we want as a business at the end of the day? And how does the technology that we're providing people tie them into being able to provide a better customer experience for our customers? And that's where our hearts are. I'm a firm believer that you don't motivate people. That's intrinsic. You have to hire motivated people, but you can inspire them. And with the things that we do at LexisNexis, I'm always tying people back to the mission. So when I talk about measuring these metrics, it's measuring how well we're serving those customers that they so intrinsically care about in their day-to-day when they're doing their jobs. So I think that metrics can be a bit of a tyranny if you're only focused on those by themselves, but metrics helps tell the story. And if you can't tell people where digital transformation is taking them and what those outcomes look like, because I'm in operations, we're outcome-based. If I can't tell people what those outcomes look like, then it's exactly where you started, where you said all this stuff has taken place, but we're still standing in the same place as we were. So that's where I think that metrics have to play a part in what you're doing, and the hearts and minds piece of it is, I already talked about in the beginning. I mean, that has to come with it.
So those metrics would be like an NPS score?
Sure, or CSAT.
Right, okay, great.
Yeah, and I also think there's a qualitative part of it where it's like that famous Supreme Court line, like I can't explain it, but I know it when I see it. Mm-hmm. So I will caveat the next statement by saying I am not a software developer, so if they generate bad product, don't yell at me, but we had the chance to do like an organizational assessment of Kessel Run. I don't know if any of you guys have had some experience with Kessel Run, if there's any Kessel runners in the room. You have never seen an organization who's more happy to be themselves than Kessel Run. Like if you haven't gone there and drank the Kool-Aid, those dudes and dudettes, like they have a culture. Again, I hope their software is good. I'm not a software person. If the software is bad, God bless. But when we went in and we sat down with those guys for like 45 days, yeah, there were issues, there were warts, and they were honest about them. But like we talked to people, and it was during kind of like a change of command, and they're like, yeah, if it's not like this anymore, like I will retire before I have to go back to doing business as usual. Like I am not gonna tolerate that because they created a culture. Now again, if you've got experience there and you think it's good, bad, ugly, and different, right? Like one thing you can say, that organization has a defined culture and they put the time and effort into cultivating it. And I was very impressed of, a lot of organizations, like you said, they're just kind of going through, and it's to your comment about the task earlier, right? Yep, I got to check these 5 boxes today, and I checked the boxes. Like those guys and gals get it. So I hope they make good software. Otherwise, I just used a really bad example. But in terms of culture, it was certainly defined.
So I would like to argue the counter argument to NPS scores.
That does not surprise me.
Well, that's what I'm here for. So
tell me.
So okay, I don't think NPS scores to us are just a stick to beat people with, right?
I haven't used it that way yet. It's a good idea, though.
I mean, yeah, so you might want to use it that way. What matters to us, and we think about customer experience, is what are the stories that customers are telling about their experience? It's all narrative. It's all based upon the narratives that people are telling about their experience and the value created through that interaction. So we're in the middle of a digital transformation in part project for 1,000 cosmetics retail stores around the globe, 7,000 employees. And what we're doing is basically tracking the customers' narratives around their change in experience from before we put in unified commerce to after, right? And what we're seeing for the 7,000 people in stores is that's all that matters to them. We could give them a number, they could care less. It's like, how am I impacting these customers' experiences? And what we see is that the stories get repeated and behavior actually is informed by narratives that turn into scripts that actually drive the changes in how people show up. And so I think the numbers are great, but unless we turn things into human conversations, and I think this is very applicable for digital transformation and a lot of other transformations going on within the Air Force, if there isn't a story around it that makes sense to people, it ain't happening, because a number is just a number.
Right, and I know this would take a whole other panel probably to discuss, but then how do you take that and scale it to the Air Force or the Army? Or do you do it all at once, top down? Do you do it bit by bit? Do you do it, how does that work? And again, we won't have enough time to drain all of this, but anyone from the panel, any thoughts on how do you make that happen?
I mean, we did a culture science training for a bunch of senior folks earlier this year, and we spent a whole bunch of time talking about how do you construct narratives that will drive a change in thinking that drives new behavior. And there's a guy named Robert Shiller, who's an economics professor, Nobel Prize winner over at Yale, who wrote a book about 5 years ago called Narrative Economics. And in that book, he says that we believe that there's all these sort of financial mechanisms that drive economic outcomes, macroeconomic outcomes. And what he says is actually no, it's narratives that drive the machinery of the economic outcomes. And that fundamentally people actually absorb these scripts as narratives, and it changes how they look at things and changes the behavior which drives the economy. And I would say, we apply that principle to organizations, knowing full well you get senior leaders to show up, tell their narratives properly. It fundamentally changes how other people show up. We see it all the time. We saw it at Edwards Air Force Base under Dragon Tykert in 2018-19. It transformed that place under his command. But you see it in the private sector all the time. You see it in social movements, in political movements. Those narratives is what informs people's thinking, and it fundamentally transforms how people behave. So.
Cool. Any other thoughts on how we get at this?
So I think in addition to that, there's got to be follow-up, right?
For sure.
So like the and like I know that the DoD tends to be more top-down, right? But there's ways you can model behavior at the leadership level and continue to model that behavior, right? Like, so this is about making sure that your leaders understand that they're embedding those narratives and behavior changes in the way that they work, but they are modeling that behavior. They're essentially making it okay for others to behave in the same way. And I think being visible and demonstrating that commitment over time is vital, like to the kind of longer term scaling of that. So what you find is like people lose steam, right? They're like, oh yeah, we had that great session, it was awesome. We're gonna do that for a few months and maybe somebody will hold us accountable in 6 months, but really after that, it kind of peters out. So I think there has to be some like embedding of that in people's performance reviews or in their your strategic objectives for the year, whatever the case may be.
So you do have to measure it.
You do. You absolutely have to measure it. And it has to be in a way that kind of hurts for people, right?
The manner of the measurement might be in question, but it needs to be measured, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't measure, doesn't happen, right? So,
Please,
final
please.
parting thoughts. I think we're about out of time. We have a couple minutes left, but
I got plenty to say, but let's see if anybody in the audience has something.
any other thoughts or questions? I know we're getting towards the end here. We've got a question over here. Thought. Bring it even better.
Even better.
We don't have to do anything for a thought.
Get the man a mic.
Yeah, I was going to say join the panel.
Lenny Schaefer with Title Athene. I actually want to comment that you're both right. You need the narrative, but you also need the metrics. The narrative is how you hear what's really important to people. It's also how you communicate and market the good idea. But once you figure out the narrative and what's important to people, you got to quantify and figure out, so what can you measure to achieve that narrative that you want to achieve? And we need both.
Yeah.
If you do just the narrative without any metrics, good luck scaling and good luck with consistency. If you do the metrics without any of the personal touch of what really matters, it might be irrelevant. So I think you're both right.
Yeah,
and
good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good. That's good.
So I would like just to respond. I totally agree, and I think there's two things going on that need to be parsed. One is, what are the drivers of transformation? And those are narrative-based. And then the question is, how do you measure the changes happening? And that obviously is metric-based. So we're totally on the same page, I think. You might even agree with me.
I'll think about it.
Okay. Well, and how do you reward that too? Like, for any of the program folks still here, like we have a tendency to, oh, you're doing great on your program. You can get by with $2 million less next year. Or, hey, I got to move, Billy Bob, Joe Bob's doing great work, but your team's strong. We need to be, when you have a strong program and those metrics are good and they have the narrative, like if you're an investor and somebody's giving you 15% returns every year, you don't take your money out to go put it somewhere else. No, I double down, right? I'm going to press that. Hey, this person's doing good. Give them more resourcing, giving more opportunities. That's where I think you scale that. You can set all the top-down directive you want, but find the work centers in your organization that are crushing it and find ways to put more poker chips, right? Bankroll them more, be it with human resources, financial resources, put them in front of the boss more, whatever it is, when people are winning and they're on a hot streak, keep pressing your advantage.
All right, now thank you. All right, well, I want to thank the panel. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for participating out there as well. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
I'm definitely going to see some there anyway.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. You're welcome. Glad you made it. Okay, now we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back at 15:30, I think, according to the schedule. So take a quick break and we'll be back for our final panel. Thank you.
Check, 1, 2, check, 1, 2, check, check.
That's the biggest one, honestly. That's why we came in. Fantastic. They have a hard time keeping it. They want to guide ideas. So I guess so my question would be, so with all the HR how did we determine the some kind of cost? Well, that's what I say all the time. Right? That was the biggest change we figured out. The idea of that time has promotion, right? I would never hire an electrician if I asked for 6 hours. But happily have information, right? All these things. So what I would say is, so we get some interesting work with the Navy, and I'll send you like one of the things we did. We're actually this thing called it's called WITS.